History begins with the fact that the imperial family Hadelamid has a former due to such basement as treason. She knew that this day would ever come, and always told her father about the need to change the system. Forbidden alchemy, used to establish an absolute monarchy, homunculus. They were sent to dangerous battles. Knights were treated well, but they did not differ from slaves. It is natural that the homunculi hidden resentment against the august persons who incited anger. Her father, the second, just neglected the danger, trying to turn a blind eye to this. However, Bridget, the third princess, put the heiress, only worsened the situation. After it was called Crown Princess, the operation of the slaves was tightened several times. The homunculi sent to long-term missions were killed in dangerous battles or died of labor, and those who listened to the palace fell into her harem, where their knightly dignity was completely trampled. She could no longer endure it and began to look for precedents in the history of deprivation of the title of heir to the throne. But Bridget, for which she became a linger in the eye, used it to conclude a political marriage. In just a week, all the knights of the monkness of the palace were collected by him to raise an uprising. This man was the king of homunculi, Michael Agneto, who was able to reproduce the will of the emperor. His mind was not blurred by the power of the imperial family, and he had outstanding leadership abilities. By decapitating her father, who blindly believed by virtue of submission, he became the new ruler, gave his first order. All members of the Kalamid family were executed, and only she, Ivan, and her sister Rosinette survived. A month has passed since it was sharpened here in anticipation of her in the afternoon before the unknown. However, she was sure that only Rosinette would remain soon, who achieved the location of Michael. The philosophical stone reacts only to the blood of the august, so they need to leave at least one. Rosinette, in love with Michael and ready for everything for him, turned out to be an ideal option. Ivan would not want to live in such conditions, and you need to regret only about the wrong choice of the heiress. At that very moment, the door opened, and a man entered the room, asking if the seventh princess was sleeping. Michael entered her chambers, the personal knight of her rabbit sister Rosinette, and the instigator of the uprising. It seemed to him that she did not expect to see him at such a late hour, absolutely for no reason. When asked what brought him here, he replied that he had just come to visit her and find out if she was comfortable. Having lowered her head, the girl asked why to visit her at such an hour. Because he should be borrowed. Michael smiled slightly, answering that it was true. He was loaded with important matters for the last month. But he finally had time to visit her. She replied that she did not need his care. For a few seconds, the man was silent, looking at the displeased expression on his face with a fair-haired girl. Approaching her, he said that she was angry during the time of imprisonment, but she has the right to blame him for it. But this does not mean that he has nothing to say. Having dismissed, Ivan asked him to move away. Michael said that she should choose him. The girl froze, after which she looked at him in surprise. He added that she would not have to go through this if she chose him with her personal knight. Members of the imperial family choose one of the horseman knights in their personal submission. The homunculus chosen by the princess or prince was supposed to serve his master with absolute fidelity. Isan rejected such a system, so she did not have a personal knight, because of which her family criticized her. The opposite to her, Rosie fell in love with Michael and ruthlessly got rid of her knight to choose him. And from the very beginning, he planned to use it exclusively to achieve his goals. Without raising her head, Ivan turned to Michael, asking that she simply had to choose him. He answered with consent, because she would not have been waiting for a death sentence now. Then the girl understood. It didn't matter to him who acts as a stupid merit or princess. The main thing is to bring the matter to the end. Putting his hand on his head, the man sighed heavily, after which he replied that she was right, calling her difficult. Suddenly, a servant burst into the room, who stated that something was wrong with the child in the womb of the empress. Hearing this news, Michael turned around, saying that he needed to go, added that they would see him soon. Eve was left alone. Her hands trembled when she decided that he had in mind the next meeting on her execution. She thought that she was already accustomed to constant fear and loneliness, but this was not entirely true. A few minutes later, someone entered her room again, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. Even saw a smiling 8th Princess Rosinette, who was her pregnant sister. Remaining to sit still, Ivan uncertainly agreed with Rosie. Add her that she looks good. Noticing her stomach, Eve was surprised that she was really pregnant from Michael, which was almost a miracle. The reason was that the homunculus was devoid of reproductive function and could not have children. Rosie noticed that it was difficult for her to believe in it, after which she decided to clarify that she did not change him. Isun began to dismiss, answering that everything was not so, because she was simply surprised at such a turn of events. Crouching next to her sister, Rosenet Friendly said that she could find out about it right now. She thinks that the fruit of their love was created thanks to the power of a philosophical stone. Yvonne said that if she was looking for Michael, then he had just left her. Apparently they surpassed. Rosie replied that she came to see her, because today is the day of her execution, so she was worried. Eve was dumbfounded by such news, because no one told her that this would take place today. The sister looked at her from the side of a smile on her face, asking her if she knew how their family was executed. Then she clarified that until now, they were executed by personal knights who were only happy. The opportunity to kill the person whom they hate with his own hand was a generous gift of Michael. There is nothing more sweet than revenge. For example, Bridget was burned and suffered for a very long time. She must have represented instant death from the guillotine, and now looks extremely shocked. In fact, a homunculus was already chosen, who would accompany her to the place of execution, even though she did not have a knight. Smiling, Rosenet said that the choice fell on the one who wished to personally deprive her of life. It was the one who most of all wants her death, namely, Michael himself, who came to her today. She wants to say that no one else hates her as much as he was, and there could be a reason for it. Due to the fact that she did not appoint herself a personal knight, he decided that she was a hypocrite. Rosie clarified that he hates her very much, thereby inciting humility and disappointment in her. At that very moment, she took out a bottle from her pocket, asking if she knew how she was executed today. Evans asked Rosie to stop, because she does not want to hear anything about it at this moment. However, my sister opposed you, saying that she should know that she would be decomposed by a brutal way. Thus, where death occurs only after 6 and maybe 10 strokes with a dull axe. At that moment, Yvonne shook the trembling, and tears went from her eyes when she stated that she did not want this. In response to this, Rosenet smiled, asking her sister not to worry, because she came to help her. With a sharp movement, she held out a mysterious bottle that she held in her hands all this time. Rosie explained that this is the poison of belladonna. If you drink it, then you can die quickly and painlessly. It was much better than waiting for your end in torment, especially since the execution has already been assigned to it. Evans looked with horror at the bottle that she took from her sister's hands, and her heart was pounding furiously. The girl relaxed slightly, after which she thanked her sister, but that she had to do this. Rosie again asked her not to worry, because this is her own choice, and she would take care of everything. The Yvonne replied that she did not want her to be punished, but Rosenet only smiled amiably. Having decided that they had nothing more to talk about, Yvonne said goodbye to her sister, and she reciprocated. However, the guest remained sitting in its place, while Ivan asked with interest if she would leave. Clutching the hand in which Eve held the bottle, Rosie asked how she could leave when she had not yet drank. With a caring look, Rosenet explained that someone should remember her last breath in this world. She helped her sister open the bottle, after which she held it out, asking for a drink as soon as possible. For a second it seemed as if Rosie was eager to see the death of his sister, which the smell of poison hit his nose. Nervously taking the bottle from the sister's hands, the Yvonne swallowed all the contents in one gulp, leaving no drop. As soon as she emptied the bottle, she immediately felt weakness throughout her body, dropping an empty vessel. In the last seconds of life, Even heard this, not believing that the sister set up it on purpose. Rosenet said that now she has no obstacles, only she remains, and Michael and the throne, all her. Smiling, she thanked the stupid sister, for who voluntarily died, not asking unnecessary questions. After some time, Michael returned to her chambers, asking displeasedly what happened here. He went to Ivan and touched her cheeks with his hand, which even surrendered through the glove with cold. He swallowed nervously, thinking only that he could only keep her nearby, away from dangers. Then he again loudly asked what happened here, to which Rosie replied that her sister committed suicide. She decided to take responsibility as a member of the imperial family and repent, having suffered punishment. Incredibly turning his head in her direction, The man asked in a rough tone where she knew this. Continuing to smile, Rosenit calmly replied that she saw everything with her own eyes. Such news aroused suspicion among Michael, so he asked if the princess herself gave her poison. The girl noticed a man's frightening gaze, but agreed, adding that she helped her sister to repent and leave. It seemed to her that he could not make a decision, and she, as his partner, helped make the right choice. The unyielding imperial person is a catastrophe for the country, so it alone is enough next to it. But before she had time to finish, when suddenly Michael glanced at her with a menacing look, asking him to close his mouth. Rosie flinched with fright, after which she asked with surprise if he was true to her. However, the man did not answer, slowly raising the Yvonne, taking her in his arms, under the stunned gaze of Rosinit. Suddenly, she fell into a cry, asking why he ignored her, because she is his wife. Keeping a cold tone, Michael asked the princess to leave the road to let him go. Suborders of the men decided to reassure Rosie, who loudly ordered not to gnaw at her. Then she turned to Michael, said that if he did not stop behaving like that, she would make him regret. The man froze. Listening to Rosenit says that he wears his child, thus deciding to manipulate them. Although he used alchemy for conception, he was interested in his health every day, calling precious blood. To Rosie's surprise, Michael only burst out, and a grin appeared on his face when he realized what she wanted to do. Then he answered the princess that, after all, she was a little confusing an experiment with pregnancy. He explained that the philosopher's stone reacts only to imperial blood, and he dominates the homunculi. Therefore, he wanted to take possession of a philosophical stone, lending her uterus and mixing her blood with his own. Roseneat, in hysteria, cried out that this did not cancel the fact that it was their joint child. Michael thought that she was not even aware of whose seed is in it, although he speaks about it so proudly. It was too generous to call him a child, because the fact that her stomach has an alchemical experiment. Therefore, one cannot be sure whether it will be born a monster or a person. When hearing this, Rosie was in shock. The man recalled that this is what she called them, and now he pretends to be that there was nothing. But he ordered the prince, who burst out and screamed, asking how he dares to treat her like that. But most of all, she was worried who was her sister, that he was so terrible about his wife. However, he did not answer, carrying Eve along the corridor, saying that she did not allow him to be near. He headed forward, thinking about what to do next and what to do, after which he called for an advisor. The price was not important, and even if you have to call all the magicians and alchemists of the empire, it must revive the Ivan, seventh princess of the empire, Ivan Cloel Hadelamid, a celebrity among homunculi. She demanded a better attitude towards them and abandoned the tradition of the imperial family in the name of their good. The princess, whom everyone despised, was not such a homunculus who would not look at her with respect. There were many people who wanted to become her personal knight, but she did not allow anyone to take this place. He stopped trying to become a knight of the seventh princess because of her unshakability and the rejection of the rules. However, he could not stop looking at her every time she suffered a terrible relationship and contempt. Due to the abandonment of bad order, it was very difficult for her to contact her family, who did not respond to her choice. He found something in himself, although nothing like that never happened to him, and when he finally understood everything, you could no longer escape from these feelings that devoured him from the inside. Member of the imperial family and homunculus, a connection that was never destined to come true. Suddenly, Michael froze when he heard the maids said that soon, the wedding of the seventh princess. And it seems, she leaves for a distant country. Most likely this political marriage, one might say, was simply sold. With anger, the man tightly squeezed the hilt of the sword, deciding that such a fate was not destined to come true. Therefore, he took possession of the imperial palace. There are no more barriers. It remains only to keep it nearby. He thought so, but fate turned away from him, presenting a very deplorable gift in his life. And now the man was sitting on the couch with a girl on his knees, looking at a huge philosopher's stone. The advisor came up to him, saying that 4 days had passed, as he had not eaten, although he had been able to capture the throne for a long time. Then he added that it is impossible to revive the deceased person, and now it is necessary to deal with the current situation. Without looking in his direction, Michael asked, "Unless the philosopher's stone does not work miracles that they talk about so much about, To use it, the blood of the Haladomid family is necessary. Then he ordered to bring Rosinit and cut off her head. The advisor replied that the eighth princess is the last member of the fallen family, so you need to leave her alive. This is necessary in order to take possession of the power of the Philosopher's Stone. But in response to this, the man asked why he would. Stroking the girl on the cheek, he said that Eves is dead, and he no longer needs a Philosopher's Stone or the Empire. The advisor was dumbfounded by such a statement and wanted to answer something, when suddenly a subordinate approached him. As soon as she informed the news, he announced His Majesty that the sage had arrived from the spruce forest. Michael said that he heard that he knew the way to revive Evie, and he is ready to pay any amount. The sage replied that, with all respect, he would receive only a breathing doll that is not able to live independently. The soul of the seventh princess has already separated from the body and dissipated, to return everything outside of opportunities. Therefore, the true resurrection that he wants is impossible, no matter how much he wanted him. Michael said that his answer is no different from those that he heard earlier, and he spends his time. However, the sage answered negatively that he wants to offer another method that could solve everything. It was only necessary to turn the time back. Hearing this, the man immediately asked if this was really possible. The figure in the mask replied that the price is high, and it will have to use half of the philosophical stone. Looking at the girl again, Michael replied that the price does not matter. He only needs a result. Not wanting to argue, the sage agreed, deciding to start preparations for the rite, so as not to pull time. A few minutes later, he was prepared a table on which the Ivan lay. The sage took out the book of spells. He also decided to clarify that before the beginning, His Majesty should know another important thing. Since the stone is associated with imperial blood, the central axis of the regression of time will not be him, but Her Highness. The man was surprised, looking again at the Ivan, saying that this means that only she would remember everything. Although he will not be able to meet her anymore, she still has a chance to meet him and change the course of history. Staking her cheek, he asked himself whether she would not choose him again and whether he would be in despair because of this. He also wondered if a bad decision would make again, but the sage replied that he did not know this. After a few seconds, the man pulled away, saying that it did not matter, after which he asked for a ritual. At that very moment, words in an unknown language that were clearly an activating spell fell from the language of the sage. When Michael saw a flash of bright light, but he decided to finally hug his beloved. Touching her nose, he said that when she is alive again, she should either kill or choose him. The events of the past flashed in the head of Ivan instantly, including Rosie, which allegedly came to help her. But after a few seconds, she asked with a crazy smile if her sister finally died. I only realized that it was from the very beginning her goal, because she was the last member of the imperial family. She remembered the words of a man who said that she should have chosen him with her personal knight. Eve realized that he was going to replace Rosie with her, but she, being a owner, would not have given it to this. All this was a trap, but she did not want to die in this way, and tried to understand when everything went wrong. When the father weakened his position and lost control, or when Bridget became a crown prince. While she was flying into the abyss of unknown, Eves asked herself if she had become her. Something would change. If you recall, she simply turned a blind eye to those who needed her help, and now she dreamed of a second chance. Suddenly, her eyes opened frantically, and the girl noticed that she woke up in tears. She jumped, panting, hearing only as the birds sang outside the window, and sunlight lit up the room. The girl was surprised that it turned out to be alive, after which she began to examine the room, asking where she was. She remembered that she was locked up, after which Rosie came and gave her a poison that cut off her life. He did not understand why she was in his bedroom, because she was a long time ago, but it was definitely not a dream and an illusion. Nothing has changed since she used this room. Trying to understand what was happening, Yvonne went to the mirror and stood on socks, staring at herself dumbfounded. Grabbing her face, Eves asked loudly why she was so young and looks 20 years old. Again, examining the room, the girl decided that she somehow managed to return to the past. However, this could not be. She decided that she suffered so much in imprisonment that she finally went crazy. Her mind could not perceive reality, because of which Ivan was very difficult to think soberly and reason. The regression of time is a high-level magic alchemy. You need to be a sage to do it. She must meet with the teacher and find out everything. And now Eve wanted to see him here. Eve decided first to calm down and think about what happened and how she was alive, and even in the past. Judging by the room and her face, she was about 20, so she was carried into the past several years ago. And if so, the third Princess Bridget has not yet become a crown prince and did not receive proper power. The leader of the uprising, Sir Agnito, and Rosie, who gave her poison, did not yet meet each other and did not fall in love. In other words, she is at the very beginning, and this time, perhaps, she will be able to correct the fate of the empire. Suddenly, she raised her head, firmly deciding that she could definitely do this, because she was given a second chance. Now, her desire was to become a crowns for everyone, and in order to prevent the war from again. At that very moment, a personal maid Stella went to her room, saying that she woke up early today. The Ivan, who was sitting on the couch, looked at the girl with surprise that today she looked very young. The maid was surprised by such a compliment, replied that this is the effect of the mask that she used yesterday. Eves noticed that Stella was also younger. She definitely returned to the past, so you need to find out what time. The girl decided to ask if there are any important events in the coming days to focus on them. The maid replied that next week, the 20th birthday of the 8th Princess Rosenet will be held. Hearing this news, Ivan shuddered, unconsciously felt the hug of the younger sister. If she performs 20, then Eves is now 21. She went into the past for as many as 8 years. The girl decided not to give a look, answering that it would be a magnificent holiday, trying not to be nervous. Stella smiled, explaining that the 20th anniversary for the imperial family is a special date. On this day, they choose personal monk knights at a special election ceremony. This ceremony is a flower of imperial events and the dream of many, a special connection that appears after the oath. They say that the homunculi lined up to become a personal knight of the 8th princess, a white rose. Dipping tea even whispered that she was not a white rose, but the belladonna of the empire, that she suits her much more. Suddenly, the girl noticed that Stella froze, so she decided to directly ask her about it. The maid replied that it was already funnier, that it has already been decided who would get the place of her personal knight. After all, literally today, a special article was published in a newspaper, which talked a lot about this. The maid asked if she remembers an unusual homunculus with silver hair at the ceremony. Knight Sylvestian Millard, he really suits Rosenet, which is a white rose of the empire. He, of course, is good handling with sword and magic, but differs from the rest with his hair. However, this was mostly the same, because homunculi were just jewelry for the august. And having met Michael 3 years later, she ruthlessly gets rid of Sylvestian, forgetting about him at that very moment. It would be better if Rosenet simply chose it, but the truth was completely different, more sinister. Michael became close to the 8th princess only for the sake of the uprising, while having no feelings for her, but he used Rosenitis to capture the throne and led the empire to the collapse, as he initially planned. Therefore, she must stop him in this life in order to prevent the terrible catastrophe of her family. There is nothing left but to keep Rosie and Michael as far away from each other as possible and prevent them from getting closer. Yvonne thought about this, forgetting about the presence of Stella, who led her out of his voice with her voice. She stated that a lot of homunculans want to offer her their loyalty, so it is worth thinking about it. The girl ironically asked that they want to swear allegiance to the princess, who has nothing. The maid immediately caught fire and replied that she was telling the truth, because she had a good reputation among homunculi. Enjoying tea, Yvonne asked her to stop, because it would be better she will take care of herself and will succeed in the future. After all, then she will find Stella a great husband, with high income and position in society. She thought that Eves was joking. Suddenly, the maid stopped smiling, whispering, "Which would be good? Choose, and she is a personal knight." Knowing that Ivan heard her, the maids apologized, because she knows that the lady does not like to talk about it. Closing her eyes, Yvonne replied that everything was in order, because she perfectly understood Stella's experiences. She knew that the maid was simply worried about her, but in her words, the share of truth was felt. The girl apologized to her, but that she causes her problems because of her stubbornness, but it would change soon. Looking at her maid, Yvonne realized that she went through a lot due to her low position. Since her mother was an alchemist, Yvonne was considered a half-blood. Besides, she passed away when Eve was small. She had authority in the field of the alchemy of the golems and appreciated literally everything that had consciousness and the ego. Eve, like her, was sure that homunculi did not differ from people and have their feelings and experiences. Therefore, she always asked for a better attitude towards them. But in the end, it became a linger in the eye for the imperial family. At some point, it began to ignore it and reduced the costs of accommodation and other little things. But she only now wondered how hard it was Stella to help her survive in such conditions. It must be, after her in a past life, Stella was simply kicked out of the castle, allowing him to live. With these thoughts, she grabbed the maid by the hand, confidently promising her to arrange a luxurious life. Stella blushed and smiled, thanking the mistress. But she also had something to say for this statement. Surviving on the knee, the maid said that she should remember that if the lady has a good life, then she also has it. Such a revelation forced the Evan to blush, after which she suggested starting to live well together. Smiling, the princess thought that she would calmly live this life, because now her reality is here. She is obliged to do everything in her power, because now an event is taking place 8 years ago. This means that Michael is still in a floating prison, and you need to immediately solve this problem. But to do this, first she needs to meet with her father, who solves all such issues. The ruler of the Hadamid Empire is allowed polygamy, so the emperor can have several wives with him. Because of this, her father has 18 children, potential heirs who seek to take possession of his recognition. And every morning, 4 to 5 princesses and princes are randomly selected to greet him. She would like to ask her father about something, but even being a princess, she has to expect an audience with him. Therefore, there will be no chance than this one. Not today, she also goes to the morning greeting. I've asked who else would be there, to which Stella replied that 4 and 5 princes, whom she did not want to see. But also the 3rd and 8th princesses will be present there. This news made Evan startle. After all, these princesses are Bridget and Rosenet, which is currently its main enemies. With them in the morning greeting, she was only that day, and she no longer introduced her other case. It was the day when she fell into Bridget's trap, because of which her father was extremely dissatisfied with the Evan. After that day, on her fatherly, to her father, who no longer wanted to see her, finally fell into disgrace. Of course, since she returned to the past, on that day, her return should be a turning point. She thought how best to do to her, and Stella immediately began to ask what she thought so seriously. To distract the lady from gray thoughts, the maid suggested that she get as best as possible. Suddenly, the event dawned, and she agreed with the maid, sitting in front of the mirror. Deciding to start with her appearance, leaning her long hair, the princess decided that from this moment there would no longer be an ugly duckling. Even decided to put on a beautiful red dress, which is why Stella said that she should also try on her hairstyle. If it is too elegant or charming, it will definitely be compared. So it is important to find a balance. Yvonne confirmed that she was not going to compete with them face to face. Stella replied that it was a wise thought. One wanted to strengthen their political situation, and the other wanted to help and Evie strengthen their positions. Stella noticed that, if you think about it, today she is very actively in choosing an appearance for the audience. Smiling, the princess agreed. From that moment, she would try her best, because she has no choice. The maid was full of enthusiasm and joy, so she said that she would do everything in her power. Suddenly, Ivan thought, as she knows the future, maybe she will be able to use this in her favor. Then she turned to Stella, saying that the sister Bridget raises her hair gathered in a braid. At the same time, Rosenet will have 2 low tails, but these were only her assumptions. The maid decided to trust her intuition, and she already had ideas what hairstyle to make her. The princess agreed with her, after which she took out a small box, asking to decorate the rest as she would say. After an hour of preparations, Yvonne, accompanied by Stella, walked to the imperial palace. The maid moved her several times, saying that they would be late if they did not rush, so they did not slow down. Turning around, Yvonne agreed with her, adding that she was simply carried away by the preparation of tea for her father. If it were not for these obsessors, they would instantly get through its deformation, although magic is prohibited in the palace. They walked forward, not noticing how the female figure looked after them, with eyes full of surprise. Thinking about her, Ivan froze when she heard the appeal in her direction, and she knew to whom this voice belongs. Turning around, she saw Rosie, who smiled amiably, wondering how her sister was doing. Looking at the girl, Eve thought that she bathed in love and received everything that she could wish for. She wore a child Michael, and even the throne was in her hands. But this did not seem enough to her. But only in order to remain the only member with the blood of the August. She killed her in such a vile way. Now she saw in front of her not a sister, but the enemy who killed her, for the sake of his selfish interests. Rosenit tilted her head, asking her sister with curiosity what was happening to her, because she looks rather strange. Eve realized that now there was no time to succumb to emotions, so she replied that she was stupefied from her beauty. From this compliment, Rosie was delighted, because of which she smiled sweetly, thanking her sister. Taking a closer look, she replied that Ivan also put a lot of effort in preparing the morning outfit. They laughed at this comment, while Four thought that she never made empty compliments. Suddenly, she noticed behind her sister's sister a gray-haired knight Monkwood, who was silent all this time. Even said friendly that she had never met her companion earlier, hinting at acquaintance. Rosie said that this is Sylvestian Millard, a knight from the Imperial Guard, who accompanies her. Ivan was surprised at the accompaniment in the palace. She uses it even before appointing to personal knights. The knight of the Imperial Guard laid his hand on his heart and bowed, greeting the seventh princess. He was a man abandoned by Rosenit, like a worn thing, but this time it would not allow this. The girl said that he had heard a lot about him, because he was a knight, that he was talented in fencing and in magic. She believes that he will become one of the best knights, and will adequately defend the one to whom he will take. Therefore, she sincerely wants him to meet a good owner who will ascend him to the top. Hearing such a speech, the man was surprised, wide opening his eyes, after which he apologized for his rudeness. He smiled, saying that he was so touched by her words that he forgot to answer, because quite rarely hears this. Even was surprised, aloud, deciding that Sylvestian had to quite often hear praise in his address. The man replied that in the empty one, when they see him for the first time, are usually interested in his unusual hair color. When he said this, Rosenit shuddered slightly, realizing that we were talking about her. For several seconds, they stood silently and looked at each other. Sylvestian was calm, and Rosie frowned. To dispel an awkward pause, Ivan said that they were late, so she suggested Rosie to go soon. When they arrived at the main palace, the servant immediately announced that the seventh and eighth princesses had arrived. Entering a spacious hall in which there was a huge table in the center, 3 people were already waiting for them. The dumbfounded Stella thought that everyone looked exactly as the princess said. Both girls made curtsy, politely greeting his sister and brothers, and asking about their health. Bridget answered this question, asking them to take their places as soon as possible, not to waste time. Both princesses immediately sat next to each other, while their movement was full of smoothness. Joyful brothers immediately turned to Rosie, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time, because of which they were very bored. Such flattering comments caused a smile on the face of Rosenit, who replied that the brothers were too generous to her. They continued to say that every grass and a sheet in the palace exists in order to highlight a flower like it. Rubens put his hand on his brother's shoulder, saying that all the greens in this room also blooms for the good of a sister. In the imperial family, where all golden-haired lime blonde of Ivan is a symbol of low origin, the brothers discussed her to say that it is fine when everything is obvious that she was only half imperial blood. She can never hide her origin, and this terribly upset her throughout her life. But she decided that it was okay, because they just enjoy this, and now she is ready for this. Contrary to their comments, Yvonne suddenly smiled, making it clear that this did not upset her at all. Now is not the time to react to such obscene ridicule, but she made the brothers be surprised. They immediately leaned toward each other, whispering confusedly that Eve's is some kind of something today. Looking at the dumbfounded brothers, Ivan thought that it was natural, because in this life everything would be different. Now only 2 persons are important to her, Bridget and Rosenit, whom she baptized with her rivals. However, for the first victory, she must capture the attention of another person who is about to come. At that very moment, the door opened, and the servant loudly announced that His Majesty had arrived. Seeing her father, the princess immediately strained, because now she needed to make every effort and luck. When the head of the family took his place, he asked if everything was fine with his children. Everyone answered in the affirmative. Emperor Desmond Dominic Callisto smiled slightly, announcing that they could begin. Then, he turned his head towards the servants, asking them to bring tea. The same bent, accepting the order. They were stopped by the voice of Ivan, who stated that she had prepared tea, after which she asked for permission to treat him. Stunned by such news of the father, you already asked if she prepared him specifically for him. The girl replied that this was her hobby. She is confident in taste and aroma, so she asks for permission to treat him. With his hands in the castle, the man replied that he had no reason to refuse, especially when his daughter offers it. Stella Teapot in her hands immediately approached the emperor, after which it began to fill the cup of Desmond. Taking the cup in his hands, the man breathed steam, after which he stated that the aroma of this tea is really magnificent. Ivan announced that it was a rooibos with lemon juice, and he perfectly relieves headache. The emperor drank a little, after which he asked if this was true, still surprised at his daughter's act. Eves answered in the affirmative, because recently she noticed that her father was wrinkling her forehead and decided that he had a headache. Desmond smiled, saying that she was very attentive to him because he really suffers from a headache. Ivan replied that she was very reverent to cook tea and learned to brew him since last week. The father said that this beautiful tea liked him, and he already feels how the pain was gone. One of the brothers said that he thought that Eve was only interested in alchemy, but now she revealed another talent to them. The princess thanked her brother, explaining that tea art is something very similar to alchemy. First, you should carefully choose all the ingredients, weigh them, and then mix everything in the correct proportions. The reason she managed to prepare such a wonderful tea is in the talent of her father that she was given to her. The man laughed, said that Eve is really talented alchemist. At that time, Eve looked at her sister. Bridget looked in disbelief in her direction, while Desmond said that she was like a young copy of him. Yvonne replied that he was exaggerating. Besides, before her third sister, much superior to her, the brothers immediately began to whisper, saying that a child with icy indifference suddenly decided to get the attention of the father. At this time, Rosenit decided that the sister was trying to copy her, but did not understand what this was caused. Suddenly, Desmond laughed, and saying that all this sounds like she was afraid of her older sister. At that very moment, Bridget smiled, said that she was very glad that she has such a smart sister like her. Suddenly, the voice gave Rubens, "Remind you that Rosie's birthday's coming soon, and she will have a personal night. This event is worthy of celebration throughout the empire." Rosenit replied that everyone passes such a ceremony. Blaglessly, Rosie added that she was a little worried about her because she was ashamed to admit something. She has no talent for magic or alchemy, so she is not sure that she can worthy of capturing the knight. The emperor asked not to worry about it, because each member of their family is able to capture at least one homunculus. The girl replied that the more unusual the homunculus, the more skills would be required for this, so she was worried. Suddenly, Rosie looked at her sister, saying that if she was like a sister of Eve's, such things would not have bothered her. After that, silence hung in the hall, while Ivan, drinking tea, mentally thanked Rosenit. Desmond confirmed that she is very capable, but she has no desire to acquire a personal knight, contrary to traditions. He did not want to hear her excuse, because she would still refuse again, as stubborn as her mother. Putting a cup on a saucer, Ivan said that this was not the same as puzzling her father, who decided to ask about it. Ave mentally told Rosie that she would take the opportunity to correct her life. Then she said that she used to think too narrowly. Because of her beliefs, she even made her father worry. Suddenly, she rose sharply from her place, while the emperor looked as surprised as possible. Putting her hand on her chest, the princess said that she thought much last night, deciding that she needed a personal knight. In her direction, the dumbfounded glances of Bridget and Rosenit immediately rushed, which did not expect such a turn. However, her brothers who pushed their mouths looked even more surprised, not believing their ears. The loud voice of his father immediately swayed around the hall when he asked if she was serious, hoping that he had not rustled. Hearing the consent, Desmond laughed that she had finally formed, after which he invited her to sit next to her. Looking at the Ivan, who headed towards the emperor, Rosie thought that things were taking a strange turn. When asked when she wants to hold a ceremony, Eve replied that she would like everything to go without formalities. Desmond suggested that if she wants to deal with this sooner, then she already has a homunculus in the ore. The princess agreed with his assumptions, explaining that this someone is a monster of a floating prison, Michael Agnito. As soon as this name sounded, a grave silence came in the hall again. No one dared to speak first. After a few seconds, Rubens jumped from his seat, asked loudly what she only thinks about. He refused to take an oath of allegiance and was enclosed in prison, a monster, which even his father did not force to obey. With an awkwardness, Ivan asked his brother if he wanted to name His Majesty's actions. Desmond frowned while his son was trying to justify himself, saying that the problem was in Gomunkel himself. Realizing that he miscalculated, the guy immediately took a guilty look. I apologized to his father. The emperor decided to explain the Ivan that this bastard was a dangerous type that has not yet passed the election ceremony. This ceremony, on which homunculins are washed, imposing absolutely fidelity to the imperial family. If Michael were an ordinary homunculus, he would be eliminated at the moment when something went wrong. But, thanks to his exceptional abilities, his punishment was limited to imprisonment in a floating prison. Her desire to capture such as him will be regarded as a challenge to the power of the imperial family. Ivan asked, unless the homunculi should not go through the election ceremony before going out. The impossibility of adequately accept the blessing of the emperor causes only pity in such a situation. The man agreed, while the daughter continued to say that she was strange to the very idea of abandoning the ceremony. The princess tried to find a place in which she could hit in order to get the consent of the emperor. After all, how a miserable homunculus cannot accept the power of His Majesty? Perhaps the reason lies in the streams of mana. Until now, he was left only as an exception, while the rest were simply destroyed. Therefore, she would like to settle this question and force him to serve as her personal knight. All this could be decided only with the help of the abilities inherited from him, her own father. The princess raised her head, in a solid voice, asking for permission to let her solve this problem. The emperor was in thought for a few seconds, after which he gave a satisfactory answer, which delighted Eve. However, the man frowned, putting his head in his arms and saying that he has one, but an important condition. After the audience, Ivan took Stella with her, and they went on a short journey through snow and cold. After a couple of hours, they reached the training complex of homunculi, which was in the polar region. About 100 new homuncles are sent here annually to grow them. Over the next 15 years, they are carefully trained and taught for the service of the imperial family. However, not all homunculi are able to pass exams and receive the first rank, which is their salvation. Only a few can get the rights to serve in the palace as a guard or personal knight. However, even they are only consumables for the imperial family, not to mention the homunculus of lower ranks. Approaching the complex, Ivan thought that it was strange that the uprising of homunculi has not yet happened. Suddenly, she raised her head, hearing an unfamiliar voice, who said that Her Highness expected. Having bowed, the man in a monocle stated that the 7th princess honored them with a great honor with his visit. Smiling, he introduced himself as Baron Pete, who was the manager of this training complex. The Ivan replied that it must have been not easy for him in such a stressful place, but he said that everything was in order. Then he asked to allow them to escort them to a floating prison, since without him they would be easily lost. They entered a huge cave, which was lit by magic lamps attached to the walls. They walked for a long time, when suddenly Pete decided to ask a little interest in the knowledge of the princess and homunculi. He asked if she knew that most homunculus who are published, mostly dark hair. This is due to the limiter used so that magic does not pass through the stream of mana, so their hair brightens. The Ivan replied that she knew this, because it was precisely because of this that Sylvestian Millard is so popular among the nobility. Grinning, Pete said that this was true, although he himself found out about this after he was appointed here. A smile lit up him when he stated that it was an amazing sight, mysterious, like insect metamorphosis. Hearing a similar comparison, the princess was slightly disappointed in this person, for he brought an unsuccessful comparison. Pete said that the EV1 requested was still not removed by the limiter, so she would see the light of his hair. After 10 minutes, they arrived at the destination, and the girl stood in front of the entrance to another room. He and Stella raised their heads, not crossing the door threshold, glancing at a huge cage hanging above the cliff. With a barely noticeable sound, The platform began to approach the cage, smoothly transporting passengers. When she saw a constrained guy, Pete asked, "Unique pink hair." However, the princess did not hear his words, because she did not expect Michael to be here in this state. Suddenly, the guy opened his eyes, staring incredulously at the guest who also looked at him. Suddenly, Pete shouted that he was an impudent bastard, after which he ordered to show respect to Her Highness. As soon as the guy heard that in front of him was the princess and a member of the imperial family, he immediately rushed forward. Dissatisfied with such a spectacle, Pete ordered him to bring him a whip, but suddenly he was interrupted by the voice of Yvonne. Having said that this was enough, the girl took some confident steps towards the cage, holding the dress. Pete and Stella immediately stated that it was dangerous there, but she replied that she wanted to talk to him personally. They wanted to say something else, but the princess turned sharply and stated in a formidable tone that this was an order. Entering the cage, I've thought that now everything is different. He was the one who was locked in a cage, and it was she who came to him. Now his position is so painful, but it is very similar when he saw her in imprisonment. She did not know if he then felt satisfaction after all the hatred that he was hiding for so much time. Despite this, it seems, Michael from a past life was more kind to her. It was evident in one detail. He never looked at her with such squeamishness and contempt as he does it now. She remembered his words from a past life, when he stated that she should choose him, so now she was here. Yvonne was glad that she had finally came for him, and now they were literally a step away from each other. "Go out in front of her!" She said that first you need to free him so that they could talk. When his shackles and gags disappeared, the guy, rubbing his hands, asked what the princess was doing here. She replied that she had to make him her personal knight, after which she introduced herself to the seventh princess. The guy was surprised, because I heard that the seventh princess flatly abandoned the personal knight. Eve confirmed his words, but now she is in dire need of strengthening her position of the heir. Michael grinned, asking, so she came to cook to him, probably heard stories about him, and if she needs a slave, so it is better to find another homunculus. The girl replied that she was not looking for a slave. In a calm tone, the princess said that she needed him, and no other homunculus would fit this role. Michael asked her to stop, because when she did not call the collar, this will still be slavery. Still, she is no different from the rest of the members of the imperial family, but he did not hope for another. Clutching his hands, the guy wondered why he was so disappointed, because she is already that they are all like that. Eve said that he could understand why he does not trust her, a member of the August dynasty, but she is not like them. She does not need a knight in order to treat him like garbage, and she also does not need no one except him. Having called his name, the princess added that only he could be her knight, but in response she saw an incredulous look. Michael uncertainly asked why he, but the girl could not say this now, because there was no time. Yvonne promised that when he became her, she would learn about everything personally from her as soon as she wanted. She was also able to promise him that she would respect her knight as much as possible. She will also never use the capture power to make him do something humiliating. The guy answered with distrust that this is an empty 3. The capture was an absolute magical contract. Eve said that he was right, and she was sorry, but she could only ask for his trust, and then, only in words. Going closer to him and extending his hand, the princess again asked him to become her personal knight. Michael looked at the girl with surprise, from which neglect or anger did not proceed, he thought for a second. Then the guy abruptly turned his head, ordering himself not even to think about it, because this woman of imperial blood. At that moment, Desmond was over his rage, and his hand trembled, barely restraining himself so as not to hit the guy. Unable to stand it, the man hit him from his feet, ordering the monster to obey him and to do what he tells. However, there was no answer, so the emperor ordered him to imprison him in a floating prison. When the guy first ended up in a cage, he decided that he would never be a slave to the imperial system. However, his thoughts were interrupted by the pleasant voice of Yvonne, who invited him to leave here, hand in hand. He replied that he hates the ruling family, and so that they would not say, for him they are all the same. But if you become a personal knight, is the only way to leave this place, then he is ready to go even to capture. Without thinking twice, the Evine sat down next to him, gently take his hand, causing surprise on the guy's face. A second later, The guy said that she knew that he did not seek to abandon the oath of fidelity to the emperor. And if she is not sure, it is better to stop now. Something may go wrong, and her life will be in danger. The girl was surprised at such speeches, after which she was surprised to ask that he was worried about her. After all, she would never have thought that it was possible. An embarrassed guy immediately turned away from her. Having discarded doubts, Even decided to start the ceremony, after which she activated the imperial seal. Seeing that the princess is not easy, Michael asked if she was in order. Having received an affirmative answer, suddenly, he felt the cage tremble, after which everything began to rumble around them, laying his ears. The guy loudly ordered her to stop, otherwise she would faint. But Ivan asked her better to support her. Michael asked with surprise that she offers just to stand and look at something so reckless. Without losing concentration, the princess replied that everything was in order, and she could easily withstand it. She remembered the conditions of her father, who stated that if she did not succeed, she would have to kill this monster. Right now, Eve decided that I should cope it at all costs. After these words, the jewelry in her hair burst. The guy immediately recognized the philosopher's stone, more precisely, this is an alchemical crystal of strengthening. Looking at the stones on her head, he immediately realized that these were prohibited high-ranking artifacts. It was them that was pulled out of a small box, asking Stell to dress her exactly how she would say. The maid was surprised that she wants to use jewelry of the late 6th Empress, and at this moment she mentally asked her mother to help her finish the ritual of capture. Michael, who was shocked at the girl's attempts, asked aloud whether he was worth all this. He did not expect to hear an answer, but Ivan loudly stated that he must have taken possession of it. Suddenly, a flash appeared between them, after which a gold thread stretched from their chest to each other. As soon as she was delighted that everything turned out, the cell shuddered again, and Eve lost her balance. The cage staggered, so that the princess began to fall with her back right into the open door, stretching out her hand in front of her. Ivan decided that this was the end, when she suddenly opened her eyes, felt that someone was holding her by the waist. The girl was surprised to notice that Michael's limiters disappeared, and his hair acquired a dark shade. Returning her back to the cage, the guy said that everything is in order now, and nothing more threatens her. From embarrassment, the princess bounced to the side, immediately blushing, because for the first time, something similar happens to her. Michael calmly noticed that everything worked out. Yvonne turned her head in his direction, carefully examining. The guy said that this is very strange, and as soon as something threatens her, his body begins to move on its own. Then he said that he had to end the knights behave like slaves, although it is worse than slavery. The only idea that the owner will fall into the hair from the head of the owner forces him to shudder. Eve was surprised at such speeches. She wondered if he had in mind when she told the owner, but he replied that it was obvious. Placing her knees, Ivan thought that Michael really made a personal knight. Seeing this, the guy asked what happened, to which he received an answer, that the ceremony demanded more strength than it seemed. With a dissatisfied look, Michael recalled that people are weaker than homunculi, should be well remembered. Handing around his hand, she asked to take care of her. He helped her get up, replied that it was mutually. The next day, when they returned home, Yvonne could not believe that she received gold as an incentive. In addition, her father gave her more servants, and he himself was beside himself with joy when he found out that everything worked out. It's good that they took care of people in advance who successfully had a capture would not have been to their liking. Walking around the territory of the palace, the princess was surprised to notice how Sir Millard walked towards her. He bowed, greeting the 7th princess, after which he said that he was glad to see her in good health. The girl reciprocated, wondering if he returns after the escort of the sister of Rosie. He confirmed her guesses, trying to politely and tactfully find out where Her Highness was all this time. Ivan replied that she was returning after the election ceremony, which did not weakly surprise the interlocutor. The man asked her not to count for impudence, but he was curious who was honored to become her personal knight. Smiling, the girl thought for a second, after which she asked if he heard about Michael Agnito. He began to strain the memory, after which he was surprised that she was talking about the monster of a floating prison. Suddenly, he began to speak barely about the search for the worthy, and something about her surroundings, when he suddenly interrupted himself. Bending her head slightly to one side, the princess called him, wanting to ask about what he was talking about. Having shuddered, the man bowed, asking him to allow him to congratulate her on the choice of a personal knight. After Ivan accepted congratulations, Millard asked permission to leave because he needs to go. Looking at the nervous gait of the knight, Eve looked in surprise after him, deciding that something had happened to him. After 10 minutes, she entered her chambers, saying that she had returned. Noticing Stell, who was fiddling with something, standing behind the screen, the joyful maid greeted Ivan, asking for a pass, because she was just in time. Entering the room, the princess noticed how Stella pushed the screen, introducing the princess of her personal knight. Now, Michael looked completely different. He was washed down and put in order, and tidied him in shape. The reddened Ivan could understand why even such a legible Rosie could not resist him. At that very moment, the guy approached her, asking why she was looking like that and whether he looked strange. Even bounced back, because it was unexpected. After which she replied nervously that this form was very suitable for him. He said that it was sad, that he had no sword. Eve replied that later she would definitely choose him good. The guy said that since she captured the knight, it could calmly demand the issuance of the sword as a fee. After all, it is usually issued immediately with the uniform, but apparently this rule was ignored. Members of the imperial family consider the knights of homunculi no more than decoration and protection. Therefore, everyone tries to choose a weapon for them, which would allocate their personal knight against the rest of the rest. The princess completely forgot about it, decided that that's why she was not given a good sword with which you can start. The guy in a calm voice said that he was not asking her to take care of this. He simply states the facts. The girl was surprised to notice that he was well aware. There was an impression that he had already lived in the palace. Michael replied that in the training complex they were taught everything to exhaustion, even court etiquette. These were the knowledge necessary for life in the palace and all aspects of the service of the imperial family. Ivan shuddered when he realized that under all aspects, he had in mind that very night service. Slowly passing by the guy, the princess felt a very awkward tension in the air. To dispel the silence, she invited him to discuss everything over a cup of tea, after which she offered to sit down. Nevertheless, she is glad that he does not refuse dialogue, so they should become closer as soon as possible. The imprint is only a temporary measure, because soon Michael will proclaim himself the king of homunculi. She is sure that it will not be difficult for him to overcome the power of the contract, and he can conceive an uprising. Then she will not be able to prevent him. So from that moment, she needs to establish a connection between them. Stella immediately began to ask if she would prepare everything herself. The Ivan answered in the affirmative. I've remembered. Then in a past life, they somehow divided a cup of tea, although she only showed politeness. She did not expect that he would agree, but soon he left, referring to the need to serve near Rosie. However, these memories circled in her head non-stop, but she did not want this to happen again. She did not know his preferences, so she asked if he had tea to his taste. He replied that he liked it. Dipping tea, Michael added that he especially likes his color, because he is very similar to the color of her eyes. The girl was very surprised at such words, which is why she looked at the knight with surprise for a few seconds. The guy asked what was wrong, but the princess only embarrassedly turned her head away, answering that everything was in order. Having lowered his head, the guy said that he should quickly head to Her Highness of the 8th Princess. Evans unconsciously closed her eyes when these memories instantly swept through her head. She decided that it was a little late to ask such a question, but she asked Michael, as he was a publication. He looked in surprise at the girl who fluttered from the wind that penetrated the room. Instead of a direct answer, the knight said that there are so many things around her hair color. With sadness with her head, the girl replied that her hair was not green, lime blonde. This is still a blonde. Michael agreed, and after several seconds, he added that it was he who was so uniquely beautiful. For several seconds, the princess silently looked at her personal knight, trying to understand why he said this. With a surprised look, Ivan suggested that he was talking about the imperial garden, and suggested that she would take a walk there later. Michael replied that you would wait impatiently, but he had in mind not so much a garden as her hair. Such words literally shocked the girl, and she did not know what to answer, while Michael was also silent. He asked that he was not so much more surprised by the princess, who replied that it was to be her question. Then she asked, Unless he hates the imperial family, he instantly replied that he hates. Pointing at herself, she clarified that, also from the imperial family. At the same moment, the guy stopped. Ivan clarified that he hates them. If he thinks, then if not to think, then everything is in order. Michael agreed if he did not focus on, he does not hatch her. She decided that this was the effect of capturing. It was just a thought. But if you think about it, there are simply no other options in my head. The knight said that everything converges. It is even logical, because if you constantly hate the owner, you get tired. But now he somehow feels badly, is afraid that without noticing, will become a devoted Shavka of the emperor. Smiling broadly, Ivan replied that this would not happen, so do not worry so much. Michael said that he was afraid to become a loyal emperor in the presence of the princess. Is it a strange situation? However, it is doubly strange for him to hear from her that this would not happen. The girl realized that she was talking. The guy is also surprised that she allows him to turn not formally, and although he thought that everything would be the other way around, Ivan replied that he could, as an exception, as her personal knight, but only when they are together. He can be addressed as soon as he likes, and in the presence of Stella too, the guy immediately clarified everything. A couple of minutes later, the princess said that tea was ready, after which she invited the knight to try him. Without commenting on the taste of tea, Michael reminded the girl that she promised to tell him something. Eve immediately remembered that she agreed to tell why she wanted to get him in personal nights. The guy agreed, adding that since he has now become her man, now he could find out the truth. He smiled. Ivan gave an affirmative answer, after which she calmly stated that she was going to become crown princess. Michael was surprised at this news, but Ive continued, saying that the main task is instead of the empress. She then added that the true goal is the liberation of homunculi from many years of slavery. Michael hardly believed that he had just heard, so he decided to ask if she was talking about this. Ivan asked in response, "Does this her gaze falls?" To which she received an answer that she looks quite convincing. Then he realized that she needed a personal knight in order to take a position in a secular society. IV confirmed, because for the crowns of the princess, this is actually important, as much as politics. Therefore, she clearly realized that the white Pharaoh, similar to her, never become the heir. Michael tried to digest the information that he had just heard, while Ivan continued to speak. As she said, this week the ceremony of the Oath of Fidelity and the second important event will be on the next. The reception will be held in honor of Rosie's birthday. This is the first official event at which she will appear with him. Therefore, this will be an important day for his return, and they need to prepare well. The princess asked her to tell her if he has plans that she better know about in advance. Leaning, the guy replied that the personal knight should always be next to the owner. That's all plans. Usually, he accompanies the owner, wherever he goes, from the moment of awakening until the night. If there are no special orders, then he sleeps and eats in the barracks of imperial knights, which is in the north. The monk knights live in groups under strict and thorough supervision in the barracks of the imperial guard. In this regard, there are no special privileges in this regard, but they may not appear on roll call. But this is only on condition that they currently provide services of a member of the imperial family. On the day of the election of the knight, a review passes, a custom when a homunculus must demonstrate his knight skills to the owner. At that very moment, Michael furtively looked at the princess, after which he shuddered, lowering his head. Even was surprised to notice that the sun was almost sitting. From this statement, the guy immediately tensed. Turning her head towards the personal knight, the princess smiled sweetly, saying that the time had come. The guy's eyes widened when he decided that it was now the time for the review that he was afraid of. With an innocent smile, the princess stated that it was time to disperse, so they would see each other tomorrow. The guy immediately skewed, but he could not believe that she said this, inquiringly tilting her head to her side, and asked what was wrong. Hinging, Michael wanted to answer something, but then blushed, after which he stated that he understood everything. It seemed to him that the seventh princess was the same as other members of the imperial family, but only embarrassed himself. He said in an uncertain tone that he would go. Ivan agreed, answering that they would see himself tomorrow morning. When the knight left the room, Stella followed him, looking after him for a few seconds. When she called him, the guy turned around, noticing a smiling maid, after which he asked what happened. She replied that the princess rarely prepares tea for someone, and until today, there were only three in her memory. These were her teacher, master of alchemy, the mistress of the magic tower, and the late fourth empress. All of them were people whom Her Highness respects and appreciates, and now he has become the fourth honorary. With a sweet smile, the maid added that she said it because she just wanted him to know about it. Having considered these words, the knight replied that he would accept this attention, for which he received gratitude from the maid. The next day, Ivan appeared to his father, accompanied by Michael, who dutifully stood next to her. Desmond cast a knight with a dismissive look, saying that he himself was a monster of a floating prison. The princess agreed with her father's words, clarifying that his name is Michael Agnito, and now he is her personal knight. The emperor said that he was the same dishonest bastard who refused to take an oath of allegiance. Evans immediately asked her father not to be angry, because she found out that he was not of his own free will. The man did not quite understand the meaning of these words, so he asked again that his daughter wants to say it. Ive explained that, as she thought, the problem was the streams of mana, and recently she was convinced of this. She managed to eliminate the problems, clearing some channels, thereby allowing him to take an oath. The girl added that luck accompanied her, but she noticed the answer to this, only the incredulous look of the emperor. Ivan immediately decided that he did not believe her, when suddenly the man asked why his daughter was so afraid, and why is so afraid to admit his outstanding abilities, so robe before the throne. Even calmed down when I realized that my father himself interpreted it so conveniently, answering that he would have been lying, saying no. However, when she stands in front of him, she is not overcome by fear. The feeling that overwhelms her is awe, full of respect. Then she laid her hand on her chest, asking how to even think about a careless tone at such a moment. He replied that he did not expect such eloquence from her, although she was the seventh daughter of the empire. He was proud of her. After all, she began to use her talents wisely. The girl bowed, thanking her father for praise. He added that she tamed the monster. It was worthy of praise, and this form betrayed him a more decent look. Eve asked for forgiveness, said that this monster had become her knight, so he asked him to contact him properly. Hearing his daughter's request, Desmond agreed with her, but there were still notes of contempt in his tone. Then he stated that before the ritual, whoever he was, he cannot recognize him as a real knight. Then he directly turned to Michael, who dutifully closed his eyes, answering the call of His Majesty. Without changing his tone and expression, the man ordered him to kneel before the emperor. Ivan at A briefly looked at her knight, after which she quietly took his hand to reassure a little.